everyone. So my name is Alexa Freeman, and I am a student here, and my major is Spanish, and I am from California. We welcome you to the Thematic session, Sustainable Development Goal Number 4, Quality Education. Goal 4 is to ensure inclusive and equitable quality education and promote lifelong learning opportunities for all, and has 7 targets and 3 means of implementation. Today we have moderating the panel Dr. Efrem Yıldız, from Vice President of the University of Salamanca in Spain. As panelists, we have the privilege to have Mr. Faissou Amadou from the Ministry of Labor and Civil Service in Benin, Dr. John Wilson, International Director of BYU Pathway, and Ms. Sarah Callaway, Assistant Director of UNICEF in New York. As we will not have time for detailed introductions. Please see their bios in the website under SDG 4. Now I will turn the time to Dr. Yıldız Sadak. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, before starting with the topic, I want just to express my gratitude for such a wonderful occasion to participate in such a summit and such a conference. In order to be a bit much more concrete, we will proceed in the following way. Each of us will speak at about 5 minutes. I don't know whether it's the telephone or not. And then we have some questions that I will raise to the 3 panelists. And then at the end, we will have the chance to have some questions among the audience. If you agree, then we will start. I would like to start especially why education, quality education. Quality education is one of the main now concerns, let's say, that fits what the first 3 SDGs, let's say, try to foster. Without education, we don't have any chance to challenge and to improve the modern 21st century society. And this is why quality education is absolutely needed in order to understand, because without a society that is educated from beneath until the top, we won't be able to achieve the goal we are looking for. Freedom, equality, education for all society strata, because as you know, more than about 260 million of children still do not have the chance and the access to the education. And more than 600 millions do not have an adequate education at a secondary level. But this part panelists will deal with it. And I will focus on what the quality education means at the higher education system level. And I'm going to give you just a short example what Europe is now doing in relation to this topic. I'm sorry. Since 2019, 2020, the European Union has launched an activity that is trying to improve let's say, the system we are using at the European level as higher education system. And now we are focusing on the alliances. There are different universities working on the same project that touch different fields. I will give you an example which has to do with the quality education directly. We have, for example, in European campus of city universities, is the consortium where the University of Salamanca is participating. We have started with a master degree, which is called Multilingualism and Languages in Contact. So the aim of the master consists on the fact that if Europe wants to be really a continent where freedom is the main issue, we have also to learn from each other. There are different cultures, different languages, but there is not a chance where this language, this culture, this richness is shared and is, let's say, taught. This, for example, belongs to a policy that the European Union is now fostering. I'm not going to take more time about this issues. We'll have other questions, but just in order to tell you that we are working in a way that really the society wants to have a kind of cohesion system, even at the education level. And this is why the quality education, the SDG 4, is essential for almost all the SDGs that have been announced this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Efrem. It's a pleasure to be with you today at Utah Valley University. I'm glad it's not February. This is the right time to meet here. My name is John Wilson. I work as the International Director of BYU Pathway Worldwide, which is a friend of Utah Valley. A little bit about the program, just to give you the context of the vision or the perspective that I'll bring to the panel. The BYU Pathway is sponsored by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and it's a sister school of Brigham Young University, Idaho, and Hawaii. We should be in Hawaii next time together. But what we do is provide online access to accredited degrees at a very low cost in over 180 countries. So part of this idea of collaboration, the church educational system of the Church of Jesus Christ is working together in collaboration to provide education to more people throughout the world. Only 75,000 students can go to campuses each year if you include all of them together. BYU Pathway Worldwide this year has served 62,000 students online in 184 countries. And the way we do that, again, is by looking at online strategic differentiation by how we do our program and our model. Just a couple of stats that might be helpful to be aware of. The cost of a university degree through BYU Pathway here in the United States is under $9,000 US. But internationally, the average price is under $2,000. And in Africa, where we actually have half of our new students internationally are Africans, the price for a bachelor's degree is under $700. So it's accessible. As we look at SDG 4, we're looking at inclusivity, we're looking at equity. 57% of our students are female. So we're helping to address a gender inequality in many of these countries for access to higher education. And we're able to support the overall framework of this SDG 4 through contributing to a worldwide vision of how do we use technology to reach more students, and how do we look at the structures of what we're delivering and lower the costs. Because if you look at good, better, best, we have Universidad de Salamanca, which is one of the best and oldest universities in the world, which needs to have its place in higher education. We need Utah Valley University as the largest university in Utah. And we need, if you look at those who have nothing, having this access and the hope that they can have a degree, a certificate, a skill that can get them to a better place, better skill set, better work, that's what we're trying to accomplish. And that's what BYU Pathway's mission is to serve the one in countries throughout the world and provide hope and access to all. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Amadou Faissou. I'm from Benin Republic. Benin is a West Africa country which shares borders with Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Togo. I'm civil servant at the Ministry of Labor and Civil Service. My area of expertise is capacity building and training. So we used to train civil service in order to upgrade their competence, their skills, and the abilities to hold the function, the position. I also work for UNESCO in the framework of capacity building for education for all. Education for all. And I also collaborate with BIT, International Labour Organization, in its mission and mandate to assist countries in policy formulation. Now, what is quality education? From the UN perspective, quality education is a fundamental human right. It's a human right because the overall objective is to leave no one behind. So in this sense, education becomes a right. To quote the Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres, he said that education is a fundamental human right and a driver for peace and sustainable development. So it must be inclusive and equitable. Equitable, meaning that all children all over the world have a right to have access to education. So, why? Because education is transformative. We need it to transform our society, to conceptualize, to analyze, and to find solution to our problem. Okay. Please, I can stop there for a while.
Excellent, excellent.
Good afternoon. My name is Sarah Callaway, and I work with UNICEF USA in support of UNICEF, which is the United Nations Children's Fund. UNICEF works in 190 countries around the world to defend children's rights and to make sure that they have access to the services and the tools that they need to reach their full potential. So SDG 4, or quality education, is a critical component of this work. You know, I think that when it comes to quality education, it's really important, especially in emergencies, which we see are taking place all around the world right now. So in emergency contexts, we know that children are 5 times more likely to be out of school if those children are living in a refugee camp than children who are not. So UNICEF's education work is really closely tied with its early childhood development, or ECD work. And really the reason for this is because we know that in those first few years of life, that's when really the foundation for learning is formed. So one statistic that always just kind of gets to me is that, you know, in the first few years of life, children's brains are forming 1 million neural connections every single second. And at UNICEF and, you know, with the UN more broadly, we don't want to miss that opportunity to, you know, provide children with the care, the nutrition, you know, the stimulation and the education that they need in order to have that firm foundation that is what they can build off of for the rest of their lives. And, you know, what allows them to have opportunities later in life and to really be able to make the most of future educational opportunities. So when it comes to, you know, ECD and education, just wanted to mention one example of a program that I think really just is an excellent example of the way that UNICEF is combining ECD and education. So UNICEF, a big enabler of UNICEF's work is partnerships that it has with, you know, with different partners of ours around the world. And so actually the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, through Latter-day Saint Charities, is one of UNICEF's major partners. And just one example that I'd love to talk about is a program that, that Latter-day Saint Charities and UNICEF started back in 2018. And it's in support of children's ECD and education. And it's really focused on children who had to flee South Sudan as a result of the conflict there. And so this program is called Learning for Life. And as I said, it started in 2018, and it really focuses on basically reaching children in the 4 largest refugee hosting communities where they have fled South Sudan to. So the DRC, Kenya, Sudan, and Uganda. And what it does is it provides these children with, it started with building classrooms, with building ECD centers, with building, schools, but also engaging parents, also training teachers, really doing everything to kind of create a really sustainable program so that children have access to education opportunities that will then serve them well throughout their entire lives. And so far, this program has been able to reach 115,000 children who now are benefiting from, from those services and really getting that strong foundation that then they can continue to learn on throughout the rest of their lives. So that's just one example of, much of the work. UNICEF has many programs like this all around the world, but I think one that really kind of, shines a light on the importance of education, particularly in emergencies and amongst refugee communities. And, it's part of, one example of the work that UNICEF is doing in this space. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Electricity, I don't know why. So anyway, now we are going to proceed to the next step of our conference or session, where I will raise some questions and the panelists will give an answer from, as you have realized, from different points of view, from a political, from an economical, and also from a humanitarian point of view. This is an excellent occasion to see how we can combine in a balanced way an issue such important as it is the quality education, SDG 4, and that's why it matters. So another question, I'm going to be very methodic, because otherwise, I'm going to get lost, and I know myself well. So just let's start with the first question. As we have underlined, the quality education is a very relevant issue for the 21st century society. How do we perceive the quality education in this context? Let's say, in this case, let's start with now ladies first, because as we have started at the beginning, from here now, please, Sarah, it's your role.
And I apologize, can I ask you just to repeat the question once more?
How do we perceive SDG 4, quality education, in this context as a relevant and very important, let's say, issue for the 21st society, 21st century society?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that we see that quality education is still a huge issue, to this day. And I think there's really kind of 2 aspects to this. One is, of course, access to education, which is hugely important. But then also, I like the SDG 4, it's not just education, it's quality education. And so UNICEF, has been really talking about for years that there is, a learning crisis that is going on, which means that, even though there are more children in school than have ever been in school before, still many of them might be in school but might not be learning. And actually at the UN General Assembly just a few weeks ago, UNICEF was kind of published a statistic that said that 2/3 of 10-year-olds around globally are not able to read and comprehend a basic kind of paragraph. And so I think this is something where, it continues to be so relevant to this day that we need to make sure that not only that there is access, but that the education that children are accessing is really quality. And I think that comes into, things like training teachers, like involving parents and communities in sort of the overall mission to make sure that children have what they need, making sure that children aren't hungry while they're at school, because that's going to be, distracting them from their ability to learn. And then, of course, on top of this, then the global pandemic that's happened the last several years resulted in so many children missing out on learning. So, there certainly are a lot of challenges, but I think that, it's as relevant now as it's ever been.
Very much, Sarah. And now it's your turn, Faissou.
Thank you. Um, Education is a goal in itself, and it can help realize the other goals. So if we want to reach all the targets, we cannot do that without education. We cannot reach the target of gender equality or environmental sustainability or peace and sustainable development without education.
As we look at an opening plenary, I think I heard the comment made by Robert Skinner, for those who may have heard that, we have to focus on the how. I think everybody here, if I say, who thinks that quality education is a good idea? Everybody agrees that it's a good idea. Raise your hand, right? The how is the question. And I love these ideas that we have to bring access to education, and it needs to be a right. But also, we have to look at innovations, like Utah Valley University has done here in Utah, innovating to serve more students. And it's that kind of delivery model, using technology, using online, to address the needs of a 21st century. We've heard the term that we need new wine for new bottles, right? We can't put old wine into new bottles, new wine into old bottles. So we need to look at education a little differently. Like I said earlier, there's always going to be this need for top universities and teaching universities, which are significant. But to get access to millions upon millions of these children who become older, you need to have access to technology through online education, distance education, so that those outcomes can still be present, but in a way that's technologically appropriate and low cost.
Well, now we are going to the second question. As you have explained in different ways, how we do perceive the quality education now, but what are we aiming for with the quality education in reality? What are we looking for? Are we just doing something which is our obligation to deal with, or is something that goes beyond? A deeper reflection is needed in this case. So what are we aiming for with the quality education in reality? Sadak?
Good question. I think that when it comes to, providing quality education, there's, of course, we could tout all the benefits, how you can measure, the impact throughout, a child's life if they have access to these opportunities. You can see kind of the ripple effects down the road. But I think that one thing that I think is just an important theme to mention is really hope. And, in the example that I was giving before about, this Learning for Life partnership, serving, some of the most vulnerable children in the world, we have examples of these children who, have been forced to flee their homes, who, were out of the education system for a long time, but who now are able to, to have the opportunities and the hope and the dreams that, basically having access to education kind of provides them. So there's this great example of a little boy who, is one of those who has benefited from this program, who, has since moved to the DRC and has since learned French and is now fluent in that as well. And so talks about, his dreams of being a doctor one day. And I just think that, those are some of the doors and really just the possibilities and the opportunities that, that education provides to individual children. But, I think that as we look at the future, that we want, the next generation to be hopeful and to be dreaming about things like that. And I think that education is just such a key component of how we get there.
Thank you.
Quality education goals is designed to protect, save lives, to empower individuals, and to let them find solution to their problem. The overall objective of education is to give power, to change, to transform society, and to bring peace. Okay.
I love that. I think of the outcomes of education. They need to be tied to, I think you mentioned earlier, Efrem, a very internal kind of change. You need to look at the world differently. It's why we learn various topics. We take geography and psychology and algebra and other fun classes. But I also think that a significant part is outcomes for economics as well, especially in developing countries. We need to make sure that we're providing the type of education that leads to jobs. BYU Pathway students internationally, after their first year, report either obtaining employment or getting a promotion or enhancing their career. And so we're happy about that. We want it to be higher, though. Higher education and education in general, whether we're starting from those very early million neuron forming years to today, we need to focus on the outcome of training to skills that are relevant for the economies. So the programs we offer, as an example, we don't, this is a great major, and don't be mad at me, philosophy is an awesome thing, and I love it, and I'm glad that universities can offer that. But if you're I'm going to Nigeria this Sunday, and if you're in Nigeria right now, you may not need right now that particular skill set. What you would need is some knowledge of that, but a degree that you can provide and work remotely to get to double or triple your income, or build the local economy and provide jobs. So that's one way I would look at how we can look at the outcome of quality education.
Yes, indeed. In this case, I would like also to add just some few words on what we pretend was education. We have learned from the past tense that without education, no society can survive. Surviving in the sense that what I understand of sharing, living together, communicating in a way that we can understand each other, as Faissou said, is the basis. And if we don't look for such purposes with the quality education, then it loses its sense, what we are struggling for. The society of the 21st century has a huge chance if you go through the, let's say, through the history, and I have done it. I have even started learning or studying the ancient schools where Babylonia, Assyria, Egypt, and so on were, let's say, the highest institutions where some few number of people had the chance to have the access to education. Now it has become a kind of natural way that we are educated, but the education, if it's not based on those values that characterize the society where freedom, respect, and especially this battle for those aspects that characterizes the human being as human being. Without education, we are not going to have any chance to explain to the next generation, to the present generation, youth, what we aim for with the quality education. Now, good, theory is nice. We can make many theories, but how can we put these theories in practice? How can we put the SDG 4, quality education, really in practice? Yeah, please, Sarah. Yeah.
Okay, so you said, how is it that we actually put SDG 4 in practice?
We have been talking until now about, the ways and so on. And now let's go to the main point. How can we put it in practice? Education, what does it mean, and how can we do it in an efficient way?
Yeah. Well, I can say that, one of the ways that UNICEF is working to do this is, again, it is, going to where the most vulnerable are, going to where those who don't currently have have any access, and providing them, again, not just with that access to education, but access to quality education. And, a major way that we do this is through partnerships, to really make sure that, that these programs are able to get up and running. And I think that, there's unfortunately still so much need all around the world, but that when we look at trying to expand these programs, and especially how to design them in such a way that they're truly sustainable, where there's a local buy-in, where there's, the local ministries of education on either the local or the country level, and where, community leaders, faith leaders, those who are kind of locally, the parents and other people within the community think that if they really support these programs and really kind of, view that they have ownership over them, that's when ultimately, these programs will really be able to last long after, UNICEF is present in a community. And we always say that, what we want to do is sort of put ourselves out of a job. You don't want there to be the need for many of these programs. There is right now. But, how is it that we design all of these, design education to be truly sustainable? And so I think that's something that, we need to be focused on as we actually implement it. As John said, everybody recognizes the need for education. But, how is it that how it's in the how, right? And so I think that focus on sustainability as we actually do it and provide it is really key to making it last in the long term.
Thank you. How to fulfill the education goals in practice. Quality education involves inputs and processes. Inputs in terms of resources, human resources, financial resources, and the contribution of the country. Yes, the country, the states. States is a duty bearer when talking about quality education. We also need leadership. Without leadership, we cannot fulfill the goals. Taking an example, it's not my intention to provoke a diplomatic incident, but what happened in Ukraine now is not acceptable. Not acceptable. We take another example, Afghanistan. Children don't have access to education. And there should be leaders to cry and cry so that to stop what's happening in Ukraine now. Ukrainian children, they're at home. So access to education is not human rights in those countries. So we need leadership. Leadership and leadership. Thank you.
Amen. We do need, and I just want to echo that. And leadership takes vision to think differently, right? Not that we need to preserve all the good from the past and look at our top institutions. Harvard has been sort of the standard university operating model, right, in all over the world. Oxford, we've seen that replicated over and over again. But we have to think and lead differently. We have to collaborate as well, because it starts at the very beginning, and we need to look at these outcomes we have in looking at, being the Minister of Labor. We have to look at job economic opportunities, but we put it into practice by building different systems, different way of seeing it, and that's where the leadership comes in. You have to look at higher education. What's its job to do? Is the job to get a bachelor's degree? Or if you're living in the Philippines, and I was just in northern Brazil, if you're living in these rural places, is that's what's needed in that particular context? You may need that for this context. But we have to think about what is education, and so micro-credentials, even stackable ones that can lead towards a degree, is part of an innovation that you can look at earning something earlier in the process. Because even in the United States, the lowest quartile of income earners have a 12% completion rate for a bachelor's degree. Here. That's not acceptable. We have to think not only about access, but completion. And the way to do that is by looking at the system differently, looking at it with a vision of how we're going to rebuild this in a way that works for the 21st century.
Yes, if I may, I just add a short reflection on the whole issue, especially how we can put it in practice. I'm working since 1994 on such topics, where I realized that there were different views, different manners of perceiving the education, different methods that sometimes were contradicting each other, different cultures that are fighting for this purpose, but at the end, there's no, this is my personal impression, there was not a program that could be used as a reference where we could put such values, such important points in common, and where the society could have a bigger profit of what the system could offer to the society of the modern day. This is why different strata, society stratas, from schools, UNICEFs, let's say, different nations, economical issues that have a huge impact on that. If you don't have the financial means, how can you focus on an education? If you don't invest, we are going now to the next two questions, which are quite interesting, where you can see those countries, those societies that have really invested in the education, they have better chances to survive in many senses. Even in the worst crisis we have been gone through a few months ago, no? COVID. If we didn't have well-educated professionals that started from the first moment of their educational period until the university and then investigation period, we wouldn't talk about COVID as we are talking now. It would be even, the impact would be even stronger. So how, now the question, the next question is related to this, to the one I have raised. To what extent do educational institutions contribute to the achievement of this goal? Do we really, from the school, from the university sides, accomplish with this commitment?
I think that my fellow panelists might have a bit more to talk about in terms of, the kind of higher educational institutions. But I will just echo, a prior point that was made, which is, really about prioritizing education. And, as you mentioned, from the very beginning of, learning in a child's life, when, their brains are still forming and they're laying that good foundation, all the way up, I think, into, if they choose to go to a university and a higher education. I think it's prioritizing that, and it's also, I think someone else had mentioned, seeing it as the key to so many other of the SDGs. That, education is, I think, really the key to unlocking and reaching so many of our other goals. But as I said, though, I'll let them, speak a bit more to kind of the higher education component.
Thank you. Just short, and then, yeah.
Oh, I'm not sure I have answer. But I think to realize or to fulfill education at these levels, it will be by partnership. We must foster partnership, harness cooperation. Only by cooperation and partnership we can face the target fully.
Thank you.
Great thoughts. We need to look at whether it's early education or higher education. What are the barriers holding the hundreds of millions of people back from doing that? You have to start with that. What's holding them back? And you can think of them right now. In fact, start thinking of what holds people back from going to university studies. I'm reading your minds right now. See if this works. Money, time, fear. If you're a first-generation student, you don't know the system. There may be other reasons. We have to build, educational institutions have to look at the problem directly and build around that. If money's a problem, you have to find ways to lower the cost, not just funding it through expensive scholarships, which is important, but you have to lower the relative cost of education. If you're looking at fear, then you need to build a system that gives first-generation students confidence. And if you're looking at access, it needs to work with somebody who is working full-time to provide for a family or to make a living. So if educational institutions don't look at those barriers in mind first, then we're not going to solve the larger problem of access to the hundreds of millions that need it worldwide.
I'll give you also an example in relation to this last question where I have been involved in, let's say, European alliances projects that the European Union has launched since 2019. And at the beginning, we were a bit skeptic what to do with what the European Commission aimed with the new policy. And they immediately launched a kind of, funding. Each project was at about 5 million euros, so it was not big money. But at the end, they encouraged the different universities of the whole European continent to start learning, working together in an efficient way. Until now, there was a kind of bilateral agreements where we could, exchange registering together, but there was not a multilateral process, real process on the way. And this is why institutions are now contributing in an efficient way. We have learned that if you work only by your own, you are not going to achieve the goals you are looking for. And this is as most of us are, somehow linked to the education environments, must learn to work in a multilateral way. And I give you an example of the alliance we have created and that was successful with the application of European funds. European Campus of City Universities used 3 main, let's say, global goals, or sustainable goals, and one of them was a quality education. And I insisted to take it to Salamanca, because I believe in such a goal, a development goal. And at the beginning, it was quite complicated to how to use it in an efficient way that would help others to understand what education really means and what it wants at the end of 2023 and then 2030, because changes are going to take place, and how we could use the SDG 4 as, leitmotif for the future. And we have learned if you don't share, you become poor. If you share, you have a profit of what you have around. You learn from each other. We learn from each other. And the European continent is now learning, which allows somehow to improve the so-called Bolognian process. And the Bolognian process now is being somehow improved in the sense where quality education focuses on the different levels of the society. If the institutions are not conscious of this fact, they are not going to be able to really train the staff that must be prepared, trained for the primary, secondary, and at the university level. And this is why the new policy that is used in Europe, in this sense, if we are able to really put it in practice, at the end, the institutions will accomplish what their duties. It's not a question of goal only, it's a question of duty. We have to be ready for the 21st century. The US is asking us such exigent acting, because the new society doesn't just stop at that level. I'm now talking about Europe, but now taking it to Africa, to South America, where the secondary school system is really now in need of a huge change. We are combining it also. This process takes in account the so-called European Iberian space of education, where now gradually the policies that are used in Europe or in Western world, United States, are being taken also to those places where the education lacks a well-structured system. So the institutions somehow are now becoming much more conscious of the necessity of building at different levels in a balanced way, where a kid needs a professional, a professor that has been educated at the university. So all these new aspects that are included in the curricula on the study plans aim to achieve this goal that institutions contribute to such an extent. I think we have now, in order to have a bit also participation of the audience, I will leave the last question. We have answered it, because also the states and so on are participating in this sense in the process of quality education. Now we have at about 12 minutes exactly to have questions among the audience, and if we don't know the answer, don't worry, we are going to tell you that we don't know. But let's have a short discussion also where questions can be raised among you. Yes, please.
Thank you so much. First of all, that was an excellent moderation and great discussion. And I just wanted to say, you said that, John, about the different factors you were reading online. Cultural. A lot of places, and even in the so-called G20 countries, G7, girls are not allowed to go to pursue higher secondary education or higher education, because their parents are often worried that if the girl is more educated, she will not find a suitable male. So it's with education is also empowerment, and your panel is a beautiful segue to the next one, which is on gender empowerment. So thank you all. That was really a great panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you are totally right. Yeah. You know, if a society, as I told you, wants to somehow progress, but with this fears, they will never progress. But when I talk about the 21st society, 21st century society, we have different concepts in according to the contents. We talk in a natural way about the 21st century society, but honestly, we do have also different even calendars and a different century vision. So this is a question of gender inequality that it's also now included in the curricula of each Western educational institution. And yeah, we are not at the level that we would love to, but here in Western, at the end we are. But yeah, there is a huge work to do in many other countries that where the fear is, in this case, if the woman arrives to education, I don't know what is going, but without the woman, the education will never be successful, because the education starts at home. Because we talk about institutions now, we talk about universities, schools, and so on. But the real education must start at home. If we don't educate our kids, the values that open their eyes, they appreciate the freedom and so on and so on. At the end, the education will become a kind of, just a dream, but never put in practice. I don't know whether the panelists want to add something to this, or should we ask for other questions? Other questions? Yeah, please. Please, could somebody take the microphone, because otherwise.
Hello, thank you all for speaking today. I actually have two questions. And my first question is, John, I believe, you mentioned how cost is a great barrier to education, particularly here in the US. I go to Lehigh University, where if you had no financial aid, you would pay more than $70,000 for 1 year of an undergraduate education. What are measures that you believe that should be taken by the American government and or American universities to make education more economically accessible to more people? And then the second question I had is, I believe you also mentioned like micro or small programs that people can do in order to become educated or eventually get a bachelor's degree. What would you say in terms of like educational elitism? Because I know for Lehigh University, there was a class I wanted to take that I couldn't at a particular semester. So I wanted to see if I could take it at a community college and get those credits transferred. But my university would not accept, wouldn't accept credits from a community college. So what are other ways to address educational elitism too, which I believe could be a barrier to those micro programs in order to get a bachelor's or any other degree?
Very, very thoughtful questions. Thank you. What was your name again?
My name is Rala.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much. So I don't know if I know the right answer, but one idea to consider of lowering the cost. So universities obviously are very expensive entities to run, and thank goodness, because they provide so much value to our society. So what I'm talking about is not a competitive model with that, but it's a strategic stratification of different levels. And of course, we have our community college system that you just mentioned. But I do think that to lower the cost, we have to look at innovative ways to actually drive it down. Now, you use those same university professors with all their knowledge and power and intelligence, and they create the curriculum that can be delivered. And many universities are doing this already, where there's a path, and that's the name of our organization, BYU Pathway. We provide a pathway for students to be able to do that at a low cost if they never can set foot on a university campus. But to address your second question, I totally agree. There needs to be better collaboration. We've talked, that's a theme, I think, of this session. We need to collaborate and not feel like this is not good enough. But we need to learn and take and accept each other's credits so that we can help get the outcomes that people are wanting to achieve. BYU Pathway offers certificates, which are these micro-credentials. They're 5 course certificates. They stack 3 certificates toward a bachelor's degree. But if somebody drops out earlier in the process, whether they're here in Utah, they're in New York City, or if they're Nigeria, they're going to have a credential that's marketable. So that's needed. I think that's why innovation is an important part of the higher education landscape. We have to change the way we look at things for the audience we're serving. And so that's how I'd address your question. Thank you.
I think we are dealing with socio-economic aspect of education. In this way, we are going to make the balance between the education as a right and education as something that bears cost. So we are going to make the balance. Now, to search for funds, I think we can make reference to humanitarian assistance. In that way, humanitarian assistance intervenes. Thank you.
Now, just emphasizing a bit, I mean, you are talking about the American system, USA system, so in Europe it's a bit different, where the costs are much lower than at universities. And somehow, you know, I believe in it, in education, in the sense that education should be a right, not a question of I don't know what. But unfortunately, sometimes also without investments, in this case, that the parents invest in their kids, and this is probably the best investment that we ever do, somehow the prices from a European point of view, okay, I'm a bit ignorant in the whole process of US system, but in Europe there is a clear objective that everybody has the right, as Yasu has underlined, has the right to have the access to education. But of course, not everybody has the financial means to accomplish with. So the European system, I see, even if there are slight differences between the countries, but at the end, the main issue is that the education is a right. And the European Union, if I tell you, has doubled and tripled the amount of billions in education. From 2020 to 2030, they are about 390 billions of euros just for education. And a very small part of this amount is given now for the universities or alliances, where they have to work on different initiatives, proposals, in order to improve the system. In relation to the second question, also we are obliged to always to add some specific, let's say, credits where ONG issues are well considered, or practice or participating in sport activities, or in delegations, a student delegate, and so on. So we do have almost at least 10 credits where the student can choose the way to participate in the social life of the academic environment. Other question? Yeah, please. Oh, you raised the hand. Yeah, please. As we have just few minutes, please, we do have time only for 2 questions. I'm very sorry, but you know, I have been told by the bosses to be on time, because I know that we are going to have other sessions. So this and the second question, and then we'll finish, if you allow me.
Okay, I just also wanted to compliment the panel for the rich information we've gotten. But I wanted to find out, because there are certain situations, especially in crisis, where there is nowhere to go to get educated. And so we must find other means. Is digitalized information helpful in that circumstance? And how do we make it available to those who are waiting to be educated? Someone raised also the issue of the costs of education, especially in private schools. Is digitalizing information and sending it out like for textbooks, would it make education any less expensive? These are the 2 questions that I have.
Just before giving, I will. You know much more about this, but you know, we are leaving now the hardcover books, but also the other means have their costs. At the end, not everybody has the chance to have a computer at home, because in Europe now is a natural, way of having this means, but there are other countries where we don't have this chance. I don't know whether the panelists would want to add to the question. Sarah?
Sure, yeah, thank you. It's a great point. I think you're really pointing out that, education, has to look different in different contexts, and that, not everybody would have access to, internet connectivity or digital tools and things like this. So thank you for raising it. And I can say that this is something that UNICEF is really focused a lot on. And so, I think there's really an effort to make sure that that kind of a program or that, education fits the context. And so just one example, I'd spoken earlier about, this Learning for Life program, right? That's providing early childhood development and education in 4 countries across East Africa. Whenever the COVID-19 pandemic hit, even though this program had created ECD centers and classrooms, all of a sudden those were closed and children couldn't go there. And, so you want to provide these children with the tools, the education tools at home, but, a digital platform wasn't going to make the most sense because there wasn't internet access in many places. And so what UNICEF did then instead was look at, okay, well, what do these children and these families and communities have access to? And we discovered that in this instance, radio was a great way that people would share information. It's a way that people had access. And so they designed, messages and basically online, not online, through the radio, kind of classes and lessons, and used radio to distribute that, and actually ended up reaching far more children than the program had initially meant to, because the radio was able to reach so much further. And so I just think that's just one example of how to adjust the medium to fit really the need and the context. Yep.
Thank you very much, Sarah. I'm very sorry, but we have to close. I'm thankful to you for your attention. I hope you have enjoyed it. I hope that we have been able also to have replied to, or to have been able to give a response, an answer to the questions we have raised. And yeah, this is just a starting point. And if somebody have questions, we are at your disposal in the halls, because now other gathering is going to take place. Thank you very much, and enjoy again the other session. Thank you. Thank you for the panelists, but anyway, they know it.